The problem with being a financial crimes investigator for the U.S. Treasury Department is that your family never understands why you have unusual things in your home. Cash and unmarked bills. Documents with serial numbers. Evidence bags with chain of custody labels. To them, it all just looks like money and paperwork. To me, it's the difference between solving federal crimes and going to prison. I'm Jennifer Hayes, 32 years old, and I've worked for Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, for 7 years. I investigate money laundering, fraud, counterfeiting, and financial crimes that cross state and international borders. My security clearance is top secret. My cases involve tracking millions of dollars through shell corporations, offshore accounts, and criminal enterprises. And sometimes, my cases require me to temporarily store evidence at my residence while we prepare for raids and arrests. Which is how I ended up with $50,000 in marked bills sitting in my home safe 2 weeks ago. My family has never understood what I do. They know I work for the government. They know I investigate financial crimes. But to them, that sounds like I'm some kind of accountant who tracks down people who don't pay their taxes. My older brother Daniel runs a construction company that's been struggling for 3 years. My younger sister Beth is a schoolteacher drowning in student loans. My parents are retired on a fixed income, constantly stressed about money. And then there's me, unmarried, childless, living alone in a nice condo in Alexandria, Virginia. To them, I'm the one who has it easy because I have a government job with job security and benefits. They've never understood that my job involves putting away people who threaten the financial stability of the entire country. That I work 60-hour weeks tracking criminal enterprises. That I can't discuss my cases, my evidence, or the very real dangers involved in investigating people who move millions in illegal funds. 6 months ago, Daniel had started asking me for money. His construction business was failing. He'd lost 2 major contracts. Workers were threatening to quit over unpaid wages. Just a loan, he'd said over family dinner. $20,000. I'll pay you back in 6 months when this big contract comes through. Daniel, I can't, I'd said carefully. I don't have that kind of liquid capital available right now. That was technically true. My money was invested, tied up in retirement accounts, not sitting around for emergency loans. You work for the government, he'd protested. You make good money. You don't have kids or a mortgage. Where's all your money going? That's not really your business, I'd replied gently. But I'm not in a position to loan you that amount right now. Mom had frowned. Jennifer, your brother is in trouble. Family helps family. I understand that. But I genuinely don't have $20,000 to give him right now. Dad had shaken his head, disappointed. When did you become so selfish? I'd let it go. What else could I do? I couldn't explain that my savings were modest because I'd spent the last 2 years helping Beth pay off her student loans. Anonymously through a third party, because she would have refused if she'd known it was me. I couldn't tell them about the financial support I'd been quietly providing Mom and Dad for their medical expenses. I definitely couldn't tell them that most of my mental energy went into hunting down criminals who would kill to protect their illegal fortunes. So I just accepted being the selfish sister and moved on. 3 weeks ago, I'd been assigned to a major case. Operation Cascade. A massive money laundering investigation involving a network of car dealerships that were fronts for washing drug money. $12 million had moved through these businesses over 2 years, with sophisticated layering techniques that took us months to unravel. We were preparing for coordinated raids. Multiple locations. Dozens of arrests. But we needed evidence. Specifically, we needed marked bills from a controlled buy that would prove the connection between the drug money and the legitimate businesses. My supervisor, Agent Martinez, had called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Hayes, we need you to hold evidence at your secure residence for 72 hours. The evidence room is being renovated and we can't risk any chain of custody issues this close to the raids. What kind of evidence? 50,000 in marked bills. Currency used in the controlled buy last week. We need it secured until Friday when the raids execute. I'd hesitated. My residence is approved for evidence storage? You completed the certification last year. Your safe meets requirements. This is standard procedure. We've got 3 other agents holding evidence at their homes this week while the renovation completes. Understood. When do you need me to take custody? Today. 4 p.m. Sign the transfer logs and secure it until Friday morning. The raids execute at 6 a.m., and we'll need that evidence in court by noon. So I'd taken custody of $50,000 in marked bills. Each bill cataloged, serial numbers recorded, placed in sealed evidence bags with tamper-proof tags. I'd signed chain of custody documents. I'd transported it to my condo, placed it in my certified safe and set my security system. Standard procedure. I'd done it half a dozen times before with various evidence. But this time Thanksgiving was on Thursday. And my family wanted to host Thanksgiving at my place. I'd tried to decline. Why don't we do it at Mom and Dad's like usual? Your place is bigger, Beth had said. And it's in the middle, easier for everyone to get to. Plus your kitchen is nicer, Mom had added. We could really spread out. I'd been stuck. Saying no would have caused questions, hurt feelings, more accusations of selfishness. And I'd rationalized that the evidence was secured in my safe in my bedroom behind a locked door. The family would be in the living room and kitchen. There was no way they'd access it. So I'd agreed. Thursday morning I'd woken early to start prep. The turkey, the sides, the endless cooking that Thanksgiving required. My safe was locked in my bedroom closet. The bedroom door was locked. The evidence was secure. The family started arriving at noon. Mom and Dad first, then Beth with her boyfriend, then Daniel with his wife Melissa and their 2 kids. Everyone brought dishes, wine, stories about their weeks. I'd been genuinely enjoying it. The stress of the case had been wearing on me, and it was nice to have family around, even if they didn't understand my life. The kids were playing. The food smelled amazing. For a few hours I could just be Jennifer, the sister and daughter, not Special Agent Hayes tracking down millions in laundered money. We'd sat down for dinner at 3 p.m. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce. The whole traditional spread. Conversation flowed. Daniel talked about a potential new contract. Beth discussed her students. Mom and Dad reminisced about past Thanksgivings. Then halfway through the meal Daniel had said something that made my blood freeze. So, Jenny, interesting thing. I was looking for your bathroom earlier and accidentally opened your bedroom door instead. My fork had stopped midway to my mouth. My bedroom door was locked. Yeah, the lock's kind of loose. Popped open when I turned the handle. Anyway, I noticed your closet door was open and I saw your safe. The room had suddenly felt very small. You went into my bedroom? After finding the door locked. By accident, he'd said defensively. But yeah, I saw the safe. Big one. Professional grade. Made me curious about what you keep in there. None of your business, I'd said quietly. That door was locked for a reason, Daniel. Mom had frowned. Jennifer, don't be rude. Your brother was just making conversation. The conversation involves him entering my locked bedroom without permission and commenting on my personal property. Family doesn't need permission, Dad had said. What are you hiding that you're so defensive about? I'd taken a breath, trying to stay calm. I'm not hiding anything. I'm setting appropriate boundaries. My bedroom was locked. That should have been respected. Daniel had shrugged. Whatever. I'm just saying that's a serious safe. Government issue looks like. What's in there? Gold bars? Secret documents? It's none of your concern. Come on, he'd pressed. You're being weird about this. What's in the safe, Jenny? Daniel, drop it. But he hadn't dropped it. And that's when everything had gone wrong. Actually, Daniel had said, exchanging a glance with Melissa, I already know what's in the safe. My heart had stopped. What did you do? The safe code is your birthday, he'd continued. Same code you've used for everything since we were kids. Mom's birthday, then Dad's, then mine. Took me 3 tries. The room had started spinning. You opened my safe? We needed the cash more than you, Dad had said, and I'd realized he was part of this too. Found $50,000 in your safe. We borrowed it, Daniel had said quickly. Just temporarily. My business is going under, Jenny. I'm about to lose everything. I needed that money. I'll pay you back. Real family shares everything, Mom had added, like she was teaching me a lesson in basic morality. I'd stood up, chair scraping loudly. You took money from my safe? When? Yesterday, Melissa had admitted. Daniel told me about seeing it. We came back while you were at work. We knew where your spare key was. All of you. I'd looked around the table. Who else was involved? Just us, Dad had said. Daniel told us about the money. We talked it over as a family. You weren't going to help your brother, so we helped him ourselves. With my money. With cash you had sitting in a safe, Dad had corrected. Not invested, not in the bank. Just sitting there. You clearly didn't need it immediately. Beth had looked uncomfortable. I didn't know about this, she'd said quietly. This is the first I'm hearing of it. At least one person had boundaries. You need to give it back, I'd said, voice shaking. Right now. All of it. We can't, Daniel had said. I already used it. Paid my workers, covered business expenses, deposited most of it to keep the company afloat. It's gone. It's not gone, Melissa had added. It's invested in Daniel's business. Once he gets the next contract, he'll pay you back with interest. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. You don't understand what you've done. We borrowed money from you, Daniel had said defensively. Yeah, without asking, but families do that. Stop being so dramatic. I'd opened my encrypted messaging app and sent an emergency code to Agent Martinez. Evidence compromised. Theft confirmed. Need immediate response team. The reply had come back in seconds. Location. Current status of suspects. My parents' house. No, wait. My house. With my family. Jesus Christ. Jennifer, who are you texting? Mom had asked. We're having a family dinner. I typed. My residence. Suspects are family members. Still on scene. Requesting guidance. The response. Secure the scene. Teams en route. 88 minutes. Do not let anyone leave. Nobody move, I'd said quietly. Nobody leaves this table. Excuse me. Dad had laughed. You don't give us orders. The money you took, I'd said carefully, wasn't mine. The laughter had died. What do you mean? Daniel had asked slowly. I mean, that was federal evidence. Marked bills from an active money laundering investigation. Every bill is cataloged with serial numbers. Every bill is tagged. And every single one is critical evidence in a case involving $12 million in drug money. The color had drained from Daniel's face. You're joking. I'm a financial crimes investigator for the U.S. Treasury Department. That money was in my custody as part of an official investigation. You stole federal evidence. You broke the chain of custody on a major case. And if you deposited that money, you just put marked bills into the banking system, which means we can track exactly where it went and what you did with it. Oh my God, Melissa had whispered. I need to know exactly what you did with that money, I'd said. Right now. Every detail. Where did it go? I paid my workers, Daniel had stammered. Cash payments. About $20,000. The rest. I deposited it to the business account. Yesterday afternoon. Which bank? Virginia Community Bank. The branch on Jefferson Street. I typed that information to Martinez. His response. Bank being contacted now. Transaction freeze in progress. Treasury enforcement teams en route. You're serious, Dad had said, realization dawning. That was real evidence? Yes. From an active case. With raids executing tomorrow morning. And now I have to report that $50,000 in critical evidence was stolen by my family members who broke into my safe and took it. We didn't know. Mom had protested. How were we supposed to know? Maybe by respecting that my bedroom door was locked? By not breaking into my safe? By not taking money that didn't belong to you? My voice had risen. You committed theft. Breaking and entering. Tampering with federal evidence. Obstruction of justice. Those are felonies. Plural. Beth's boyfriend had stood up. I think we should go. We weren't involved in this. Nobody leaves, I'd said firmly. Treasury enforcement teams are already en route. If you try to leave, that's fleeing the scene of a federal crime. Jennifer, you can't be serious about this, Dad had said. We're your family. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. And now I have to explain to my supervisor and a federal judge how evidence in my custody was compromised because my family broke into my safe. Daniel had put his head in his hands. My business is finished. I'm going to prison. Yes, I'd said quietly. You probably are. That's when we'd heard the vehicles outside. Multiple vehicles arriving fast with sirens briefly whooping. The kids had started crying. Melissa had gone pale. Mom had grabbed Dad's hand. I'd walked to the door and opened it. 6 agents in Treasury enforcement jackets stood outside, hands near their weapons. Special Agent Hayes? The lead agent had asked. Yes. The suspects are inside. Family members. They've confessed to taking the evidence and depositing most of it in a bank account. I have the bank information. How much did they take? All of it. 50,000. About 20 went to cash payments. 30 was deposited yesterday. The agent had whistled low. That's going to be a nightmare to recover. Is the chain of custody completely broken? Yes. Multiple unauthorized persons accessed the evidence. Unknown time out of custody. Commingling with other funds. The bills are probably already dispersed through multiple transactions. The case. Likely compromised. We'll need to discuss with the prosecution team, but without clean chain of custody on the buy money. I trailed off. We both knew what it meant. Months of work potentially ruined. The agents had entered my condo. The Thanksgiving meal sat half-eaten on the table. A Norman Rockwell painting turned into a crime scene. We need statements from everyone, the lead agent had announced. You're all witnesses and potential suspects in a federal evidence tampering case. Mom had started crying. We didn't tamper with anything. We just borrowed money. You stole federal evidence, the agent had corrected. That's a federal crime. Who was involved in the theft? Just Daniel, Melissa, and my parents, I'd said. Beth and her boyfriend weren't involved or aware. They can go, but we'll need their contact information for statements. Beth had grabbed her boyfriend's hand and practically run from the condo. I didn't blame her. The agents had separated Daniel, Melissa, and my parents. Standard procedure for witness interviews. Each was questioned separately about what they'd done, what they'd known, where the money had gone. I'd sat in my kitchen with Agent Martinez, who'd arrived with the second wave of enforcement. Walk me through your security procedures, he'd said. I'd explained everything. The evidence transfer, the certified safe, the locked bedroom. I'd explained about Thanksgiving, about my decision to host, about my brother's unauthorized entry to my bedroom. And they had your spare key? Yes. I didn't know they knew where it was. Safe combination? Family birthdays. I know, it's a stupid combination. I thought being in my locked apartment was sufficient. Martinez had rubbed his face. Hayes, this isn't your fault. You followed procedure. The safe was certified, the evidence was secured, you had no reason to expect family members would commit breaking and entering. But they did. And now the case is compromised. Maybe. The bills are marked, we can track them. If your brother deposited 30,000, we can freeze that account, trace the transactions, potentially recover most of it. The 20 in cash payments is trickier, but we can identify the recipients and recover the bills. It's not ideal, but it might not be case-ending. And my family? He'd looked at me seriously. They're going to be arrested. Federal charges. This isn't something we can sweep under the rug, Hayes. They stole evidence in an active investigation. That's mandatory prosecution. I know. Are you okay with that? I'd thought about Daniel's struggling business. About my parents' limited retirement income. About the legal fees they'd face, the criminal records, the consequences that would follow them forever. And then I'd thought about the $12 million in drug money we were trying to trace. About the criminal enterprise we were trying to dismantle. About the precedent it would set if federal agents' family members could steal evidence without consequences. Yes, I'd said. I'm okay with that. The interviews had taken 4 hours. By the time the agents finished, it was nearly midnight. The Thanksgiving dinner had long since gone cold. Daniel, Melissa, and my parents were arrested and taken into federal custody. Charges included theft of government property, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. Bail was set at $100,000 each. Money none of them had. I'd sat alone in my condo that night looking at the ruined Thanksgiving dinner and cried for the first time in years. The next morning, the raids on Operation Cascade had executed as planned. But without the clean chain of custody on the marked bills, the prosecution was more complicated. We could still trace the money, still prove the laundering scheme, but the defense attorneys would have a field day with the compromised evidence. Agent Martinez had pulled me aside after the morning briefing. The good news is we've recovered about 42,000 of the 50. Your brother's bank account was frozen before he could spend most of it. We've identified most of the workers who received cash payments and recovered those bills. 8,000 is still unaccounted for, but we're working on it. What about the case? Prosecution thinks they can work with it. The marked bills are documented evidence of commingling, which actually helps prove the money laundering charge. It's not what we wanted, but it's not case-ending. The defense will argue chain of custody issues, but we've got enough other evidence to make the charges stick. And my family? Your brother and sister-in-law are facing 5 to 7 years. Your parents, given their age and lack of criminal history, are looking at reduced charges, possibly probation and restitution. But they all need lawyers. Good ones. I'd nodded numbly. Hayes, take some time off. This is trauma. Family arrest situations are brutal. I'm fine. You're not fine. Nobody's fine after arresting their own parents. Take a week. See the department therapist. That's an order, not a suggestion. So I'd taken the week. But I hadn't seen the therapist, not yet. I'd spent 7 days in my condo, avoiding calls from extended family members demanding to know how I could do this, how I could let my parents be arrested, how I could be so heartless. Beth had come by on day 3. She'd hugged me without speaking, then left a casserole and some wine. The only family member who understood that I hadn't had a choice. Daniel's lawyer had called on day 5. Miss Hayes, I'm representing your brother. He's willing to take a plea deal, reduce charges in exchange for full cooperation and restitution. Talk to the prosecution, I'd said. I'm not involved in plea negotiations. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry. He didn't understand what he was taking. That doesn't make it not theft. I know. But he wanted you to know. I'd hung up without responding. Mom had called from jail on day 6, collect call from the detention center. I'd almost declined it, but curiosity had won. Jennifer, please, she'd said, voice breaking. Help us. Talk to your boss. Tell them we didn't understand. You understood enough to know it was theft, I'd replied. You understood enough to plan it, break into my apartment, open my safe and take money that wasn't yours. We thought it was yours. It was in a government-certified safe in the home of a federal agent. What did you think it was for? We needed the money, she'd sobbed. Daniel's business is his whole life. We were trying to save him. By stealing federal evidence. Mom, do you understand what you've done? Not just to yourselves but to my case? To my career? I'm under investigation now because evidence in my custody was compromised. We didn't think. Exactly. You didn't think. You saw money and took it. And now you're in jail facing felony charges. Please, Jennifer. We're your parents. And I'm a federal agent who took an oath. That oath doesn't have an exception for family members. She'd cried until the call time expired. 3 weeks later, I sat in the prosecution's office while they outlined the plea deals. Daniel would plead guilty to theft of government property and obstruction of justice. 42 months in federal prison followed by 3 years supervised release, and full restitution of $50,000 plus investigation costs. Melissa would plead guilty to conspiracy and accessory charges. 24 months in prison, supervised release and joint restitution. Mom and Dad, given their age and minimal involvement, would plead guilty to misdemeanor theft charges. No prison time but 3 years probation, $10,000 fines each and restitution payments. What about the case? I'd asked. Operation Cascade? Complicated but viable, the prosecutor had said. The defense is arguing chain of custody issues, but we're using the marked bills your family spent as evidence of money laundering, showing how easily drug money integrates into legitimate commerce. It's actually strengthening part of our argument. So my family's crime helped the case? In a weird way, yes. Doesn't excuse what they did, but there's irony there. I'd left that meeting feeling hollow. My family had committed crimes that both hurt and helped the case. They'd face years in prison or probation. And I'd been the one to report them, knowing exactly what would happen. The mandatory therapy sessions started that week. The department psychologist had specialized in law enforcement family trauma. How are you sleeping? She'd asked in our first session. Not well. Nightmares? No. Just lying awake thinking about Thanksgiving dinner. Wondering if I should have done something differently. Like what? Not hosted. Kept the evidence at the office somehow. Better safe combination. Hidden the safe. Something. You followed proper procedures. Your family committed crimes. That's not your fault. They're still going to prison because I reported them. They're going to prison because they stole federal evidence. You did your job. Would you rather have covered it up? No, I'd said immediately. But I wish it hadn't happened at all. That's fair. But it did happen. And now you're dealing with consequences. Professional, personal, emotional. That's what we're here to work through. The sessions helped, eventually. Learning to separate my guilt from my responsibility. Understanding that I could grieve my family relationships while still believing I'd done the right thing. 4 months after Thanksgiving, Daniel and Melissa were sentenced. I attended the sentencing hearing. The prosecutor had asked me to as the investigating agent. The judge had been stern. Mr. Chin, you stole evidence from a federal investigation. You compromised a major case involving millions of dollars in drug money. The fact that your sister is a federal agent makes this worse, not better. You violated her trust and her professional responsibilities. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Yes, Your Honor, Daniel had said quietly. I destroyed my business, my marriage, my family, and my sister's trust. All for money I spent in 2 days. I understand. Mrs. Chin, you participated willingly in this theft. You helped plan it and execute it. Do you have anything to say? Just that I'm sorry, Melissa had whispered. And that Jennifer tried to help us legally. We should have listened. The judge had handed down the agreed sentences. 42 months for Daniel, 24 for Melissa. They'd report to their designated facilities within 30 days. Mom and Dad had been sentenced separately, receiving their probation and fines with stern warnings about the consequences of violating probation. After the hearing, Daniel had approached me in the hallway. A marshal stood nearby. He was technically still in custody. Jenny, I don't expect forgiveness, he'd said. But I want you to know I understand now. What you do matters. The rules matter. And I'm sorry I didn't respect that before. Okay, I'd said simply. Will you visit? When I'm in prison? I'd thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know, I'd finally said. Maybe. Eventually. But right now I need space. He'd nodded, eyes wet. I understand. Take care of yourself, Jenny. They'd led him away. Beth had found me in the parking lot afterward. You okay? Not really. Yeah. Me neither. She put her arm around my shoulders. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I'm sorry it had to be you who did it. Thanks. Mom and Dad are furious with you. They think you should have covered for them. I know. I told them they were wrong. That they committed crimes and you did your job. I don't think they want to hear it, but it's true. Doesn't make it easier. No, Beth had agreed. It doesn't. But it's still true. 6 months after Thanksgiving, Operation Cascade concluded with guilty verdicts on all major charges. 12 defendants convicted of money laundering, fraud, and racketeering. The marked bills my family had stolen and spent became evidence that helped demonstrate how drug money moved through legitimate channels. The judge in that case had actually referenced my family's theft in his ruling. The fact that federal evidence could be stolen and immediately integrated into normal commerce demonstrates the very money laundering techniques this case prosecutes. Agent Martinez had brought me the news. Your family inadvertently helped convict the people we were investigating. That's got to feel complicated. Everything about this feels complicated. How are you holding up? Day by day. Therapy helps. Time helps. But I still wake up sometimes thinking about that Thanksgiving dinner. The one where you arrested your parents? Yeah. That one. He'd smiled sadly. For what it's worth, Hayes, you handled an impossible situation with integrity. Not many agents could have made that call. Didn't feel like I had a choice. You didn't. But you still made it. That takes courage. A year after Thanksgiving, I visited Daniel in federal prison in West Virginia. Beth came with me, moral support. Daniel looked older, thinner. Prison had been hard on him, but he was surviving. Thanks for coming, he'd said when we sat down in the visiting room. Wasn't sure I would, I'd admitted. But Beth convinced me. I'm glad she did. He'd looked at me carefully. You look good. Better than at the sentencing. Therapy. Time. Accepting that I can't change what happened. I wrote you letters, he'd said. Never sent them. Didn't think you'd want to hear from me. Probably wouldn't have read them right away, I'd agreed. But maybe eventually. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About what I did. Why I did it. And I realized. I always resented you a little. You had the stable government job, the security, the success. I was struggling with the business, always stressed about money. And I took that out on you by not respecting your boundaries. Yeah. You did. I'm sorry. For all of it. For breaking into your safe, for stealing the money, for not listening to you about the loan, for all the years I dismissed what you do. You were right to turn me in. I committed crimes. I deserved the consequences. It was what I'd needed to hear for a year. But hearing it didn't magically fix everything. I appreciate that, I'd said carefully. But we're not okay, Daniel. Maybe someday, but not yet. I know. I just wanted you to know I get it now. What you did was right. I'm not angry anymore. Good. Because I'd do it again if I had to. He'd smiled slightly. I believe you. That's actually comforting in a weird way. Knowing you have principles you won't compromise, even for family. We talked for the rest of the visit. Carefully neutral topics about Beth's teaching, about my work, what I could discuss. About his plans for after release. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Beginning, maybe. Mom and Dad never came around. They completed their probation, paid their fines and restitution, but they never forgave me for not covering for them. The last time I'd spoken to Dad, he'd said, "You chose your job over your family." I don't know if I can forgive that. I'd replied, I chose my oath over protecting criminals. Even if those criminals were family. And I can live with that. We hadn't spoken since. Beth and I stayed close. She was the only family member who fully understood that I'd been in an impossible position and had chosen the only ethical path available. 2 years after Thanksgiving, I received a promotion. Supervisory Special Agent, leading a team of Financial Crimes Investigators. The promotion included a commendation for exceptional integrity in the face of personal hardship. The commendation cited my handling of the evidence theft, my immediate reporting, my cooperation with the investigation. It praised my commitment to duty even when that duty required tremendous personal sacrifice. I kept the commendation in my desk drawer, not displayed. Some achievements feel too complicated to celebrate. My therapist asked me once if I regretted what I'd done. No, I'd said. But I regret that it had to happen. I regret that my family put me in that position. I regret that doing the right thing cost me most of my family relationships. But not the choice itself. Not the choice itself. If I'd covered it up, I'd have violated my oath, compromised an investigation, and become a criminal myself. That's not who I am. Even if it means being alone. I'd thought about that. Really thought about it. Even then, I'd said. Because integrity isn't about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the right thing when it costs you everything. And it had cost me nearly everything. But I still had my integrity. My career. My self-respect. The knowledge that when tested I'd chosen principle over comfort, duty over family loyalty, justice over personal cost. Some people would say that makes me cold. Heartless. That I chose wrong. But somewhere 12 people were in prison for money laundering because Operation Cascade succeeded. Millions in drug money had been seized. A criminal enterprise had been dismantled. And none of that would have happened if I'd covered up my family's theft. So yes, I'd lost my family. But I'd kept my integrity. And in the end, that was the only choice I could live with. Even if it meant living with it alone.